Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the reading of the one-shot entitled Intrusive Thoughts. Here's the summary. There was one secret that was entirely his own, one that he'd rather die than reveal. His mind was sick. His thoughts were violent and disgusting, and he couldn't make them go away. He could tell himself all he wants that he didn't want these things, that he would never act on them. But a part of him whispers back that this is his true nature, that he is violent and disgusting and wants these things. He wondered which part of him was lying. Or, Izuku has intrusive thoughts. After a run-in with a couple robbers, a quirk accident leaves Aizawa with the ability to read his mind. Izuku panics. Izuku had secrets. He didn't want people to know how he was treated in middle school, or how badly Kachan had bullied him. He didn't want people to know how close he'd come to taking the fastest way down from that rooftop All Might had left him on. One for all, not to mention the fact that he was born quirkless. He didn't want these secrets to get out, but none of them were entirely his own. Everyone at Aldera had known about his quirk status and how he was treated. All Might had shared the secret of One for All with several people already. Even Kachan knew about each of these. Things had gotten better between them, but nothing could have ever prepared him for Kachan's tears and apologies when Izuku revealed he'd almost killed himself that day. There was one secret that was entirely his own, one that he'd rather die than reveal. His mind was sick. His thoughts were violent and disgusting, and he couldn't make them go away. He could tell himself all he wants that he didn't want these things, that he would never act on them. But a part of him whispers back that this is his true nature, that he is violent and disgusting and wants these things. He wondered which part of him was lying. "Thanks, Deku. That's really nice of you." Uraraka responded to his offer to help her out later with her essay for their ethics class. Images flashed unbidden, One for All coursing through his veins as he hit her unprompted, the full power of his quirk behind his blow. How she might look at him, eyes full of hurt and betrayal, when she'd ask him why he would do something like that. Izuku smiled, a little strained. "It's no problem." He sat down at his desk and clenched his teeth, as though the tension in his jaw would fight away these thoughts. It always happened when someone called him nice or a good person. His mind would conjure up these violent thoughts, as though to prove them wrong. It always left him tinged with guilt. "I've never hurt anyone. I would never hurt my friends." He repeated it like a mantra. He stared down at his desk, his leg bouncing nervously as he pushed away the thought. He'd never hurt her. He wouldn't. He felt the thoughts creeping back, and he was so entranced in fighting it that he was oblivious to Aizawa-sensei standing at the door, as the rest of the class quieted down. Aizawa-sensei walked in and eyed the class, gaze falling onto Izuku for a moment. Sensei, lunging forward, wrapping his capture scarf around his neck and pulling tight, cold eyes staring into his as he gasped for breath. 3 seconds, Aizawa said gruffly. Better. Izuku's hands clenched in his lap, and he notices Aizawa-sensei's eyes fall on him in concern. The difference between them and those his mind conjured up is enough to remind him that he wouldn't. He knew Aizawa would rather die before hurting any of them, despite what his intrusive thoughts would like him to think. He took in a deep breath and forced his fingers to relax. His joints ached a little with a sudden release of tension. He wouldn't. Stop thinking about it. His thoughts were stuck in a loop. He pointedly tried to focus on the lesson, but they crept up steadily the longer he ignored it. Stop it. Stop it. Hero ethics. Focus. The trolley problem. Are the numbers all that matter? In the context where all other things are equal, you can save 5 people from the trolley if you redirect it to kill the one. Intuitively, most will pull the lever. Stop it. Focus. Ethics. Focus. On a basic mathematical level, if we ascribe every life equal value, then it is only logical to seek the outcome where most people are saved. But why does our intuition change if, say, we harvest the organs of a healthy man to save the lives of 5 people who need an organ transplant to survive? It's still sacrificing the one to save the 5, so why is it different? Where do we draw that line? What makes one so different from the other? Does anything change if we consider whose life is being sacrificed or saved? Focus. Stop it. Don't think about it. Sensei wouldn't. His thoughts run in parallel sometimes. You wouldn't know it from the way he mumbled and rambled, seemingly spewing his stream of consciousness with nothing filtered out. But his intrusive thoughts never permeated that consciousness. He didn't need to actively censor, because he doubted he even had the ability to speak these words out loud. He couldn't. They'd get lodged in his throat and choke him up. But alongside how intensely he got lost in his ramblings with his mind running a mile a minute, his intrusive thoughts run in circles. He tried to push them away, only for them to force their way back even harder and make their presence known. A feedback loop. So he can never escape how fucked up his mind is. They're bad today. He's been stressed and anxious lately, and acknowledging that only makes them worse. Fuck. He wondered what people would say if they knew. How they would look at him with disgust. Izuku gnawed on the inside of his cheek and copied down the notes. Midoriya, Aizawa called after dismissing the class. Stay for a minute. Izuku nodded, swallowing the sudden flurry of images of Aizawa holding him back to hurt him, putting his hands on him. Stop it. He waited until the others left the class, then looked to Aizawa. Yes, Sensei. Are you doing all right, kid? He asked. You seemed distracted during class. I'm fine, Izuku answered unconvincingly. I didn't sleep well, that's all. Aizawa didn't outwardly react to the lie, then sighed. Okay, then. Go on to lunch. Izuku bowed slightly and walked towards the door, only for Aizawa to call out to him. Problem child. Izuku hummed. You can talk to me if you ever need anything. Izuku felt guilt churning in his stomach as he smiled. I know, Sensei. Izuku had different kinds of intrusive thoughts. The first kind centered around hurting others. When he was made aware of just how much power he held, and how easily he could destroy his relationships with just one act. Earlier, he had thought of Uraraka and how easily One for All would hurt her. There would have been nothing anyone could have done to stop him in time, and just like that, things would be over. He'd lose all his friends, be expelled, jailed, probably. He'd have hurt one of his best friends, everything gone, in one moment. It scared him, how little control he has over his thoughts. He remembered the first time it happened. He was sitting on his mother's lap while they watched a movie, and he was suddenly struck with the thought of hurting her. He'd instantly burst into tears, sobbing into her shirt and clutching at her so desperately as the thought made him sick. He'd never want to hurt his mama, and couldn't believe that the thought could even cross his mind. She rubbed his back and soothed him, asking if the movie scared him. I love you, Mama, he whispered instead through broken sobs, knowing his words were really an apology. He thought about others hurting him, too. usually adults he's come to respect. He thought about All Might hurting him, sometimes, but this kind of intrusive thought happened more commonly with Aizawa. It seemed like a kind of cruel irony that his mind could think of such things. These kinds of thoughts were new, maybe because before UA, there weren't exactly adults he could trust. But he trusted Aizawa with his life. He knew he could go to him with his other secrets if he were only brave enough to tell him. He knew that Aizawa cared about him, about all of his students. Because if Aizawa did any of the things his intrusive thoughts suggested, it would be the biggest betrayal. Izuku knew that trust is a fickle thing. He knew how easily he could break it, and how easily someone could break his. And perhaps it's just a representation of just how deeply Izuku trusts Aizawa, that the thoughts of the man's betrayal are so extreme. Aizawa wouldn't hurt him. Aizawa would never touch him. He wouldn't think about Izuku that way. Stop it. And if Aizawa was the closest thing to a father figure Izuku had, well, it only made everything worse. He had thoughts of hurting himself, too. He didn't mind these so much because the only person they hurt was himself. He hadn't really thought of killing himself for a long time, not since the day he met All Might. It's been fleeting thoughts, mostly, born out of habit from being in such a bad place for such a long time. He wanted to live, and he could tell the difference between these thoughts and those from when things were bad. Thoughts like when he was somewhere up high and wondered, what if he just stepped down? It's detached in a different way from when he was suicidal. He had decided he wanted to quit learning how to drive, because one lesson with his mom had him thinking about swerving into oncoming traffic. Not because he wanted to, or wanted either of them to die, but rather, what if he just did it? He stared down at the knife, gripping it intently as he chopped some veggies for Kachan's curry, chasing away thoughts of turning the knife on himself. "Oi, Deku!" Kachan called out, looking at Izuku with a hint of concern, before it twisted into a snarl. "If you're gonna cut that so fucking slowly, you might as well let me do it." It's fine," Izuku stammered out. "I'll be faster." Kachan huffed. "We don't have enough rice." "Okay," Izuku responded, brow furrowing at the non-sequitur. "Then maybe you should fucking buy some and make yourself useful instead of taking 10 minutes to cut one damn sweet potato." "Sure, Kachan." Kachan frowned at him as he left, and Izuku was left facing his fourth kind of intrusive thoughts. These would happen when someone caught him mid-intrusive thought, or if he had thought something especially vile. It was illogical, irrational. His mind would become convinced that someone else could hear his thoughts every time he was given an odd look or someone was rude to him or ignored him. His mind whispered that they knew. It felt especially stupid in class when his mind would plead and beg and promise that these intrusive thoughts weren't indicative of who he really was or what he wanted, that his mind was just broken. He'd never act on any of this. A fleeting, what if someone could read my mind? And his thoughts spiral. These shouldn't be worse than thoughts of harming himself because he knew it was stupid, but it made him so anxious. Someone finding out is quite possibly his worst nightmare. So someone who could, hypothetically, hear his thoughts to just understand. He didn't think he could stop. "I promise I don't want to hurt myself, Kachan." He knew Kachan couldn't hear him. He knows it's more likely he saw Izuku's intense focus on the knife and got a little worried because of what Izuku had told him in the past. But he throws the thought out there anyway, just in case. He reached Aizawa's door and knocked. "Midoriya, what can I do for you?" Aizawa asked. "Kachan wants me to get some rice for dinner tonight," Izuku responded. Since they moved into the dorms, they needed a chaperone to accompany them off campus, and Aizawa normally doesn't mind. He said it was only logical to be there already when they'd inevitably attract villains, and considering their track record and all, Izuku supposed that was fair. Then be dragged out of bed anyway to deal with whatever trouble they got into. All right, just let me grab a few things. The walk there was quiet. The winter air nipped at their skin, and Aizawa buried his face into a scarf for warmth, while Izuku shivered. He had stupidly decided to wear his autumn jacket, thinking it had not been that cold that day. And it hadn't been. But the sun set early, and the wind was unforgiving against his face. "Are you cold?" Aizawa asked. I'm okay," Izuku responded, teeth chattering. Aizawa let out a snort at the obvious lie, and wrapped his scarf around Izuku's shoulders. You don't..." Izuku started. "I don't mind, kid." Izuku smiled, feeling warm from both the gesture and the scarf. "Thanks, Sensei," he whispered. He noticed a small smile on his face when he looked over to him. Sensei lunging forward, wrapping his capture scarf around his neck and pulling tight. "Stop it." The warm feeling was soured, and his stomach churned. He hid his face in the scarf, not wanting Aizawa to see his expression. He squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't want to cry. Why did everything good have to be tainted? He hated thinking about him this way. Aizawa-sensei didn't deserve that. He was a good man. He'd never hurt or touch him. Stop it. If he noticed the sudden shift in his mood, he said nothing of it. The trip to the store was quick. Izuku headed straight for the rice while Aizawa was sidetracked by the aisle with pet food and cat toys. They headed to the front to pay, only one person ahead of them in line. The cashier, a thin woman in her 30s, helped bag their groceries as he and Aizawa waited for their turn. There was a customer standing closely behind him, too close for Izuku's comfort. Aizawa eyed him warily, and Izuku tried to take a step away, but the man followed, keeping himself firmly in Izuku's space. Before he or Aizawa could react, several things occurred in quick succession. The bell chimed as the customer ahead of them left the store, and a 7-foot-tall man with 6 arms slipped inside after him. Izuku barely registered him locking the entrance behind him, because something small and hard is pressed firmly against the back of his head. Aizawa stiffened, eyes widening, and hand twitching for a scarf that still wrapped around his student's shoulders. Click. Izuku's breath hitched. Fuck. Is he going to die here? "Hey, easy," Aizawa said slowly, not moving a muscle to keep from spooking the guy. The gun is pushed harder into the back of Izuku's head. "Get on the fucking ground!" He waved the gun at Aizawa, then pointed it back to Izuku as his sensei complied, and dropped to his knees. "Don't move, unless you want me to blow this kid's fucking brains out." The man with 6 arms pulled out 2 guns of his own. "Here's what's gonna happen," he began, pointing one weapon at Aizawa, and the other at the cashier. "You're going to sit on the ground and shut up. You won't move, you won't call for help or scream. No one's gonna play hero, and you'll all make it out alive. Got it?" Aizawa nodded. It was only the 5 of them in the store, and with a gun to each of their heads, Aizawa wouldn't do anything risky. "Good. You." He turned towards the cashier. "Take out all the cash in the store and put it in a bag for me. Not just the register, the safe too." She didn't react. She was pale and trembling, and obviously too scared to move. "Now!" Both of his guns were now aimed her way. She flinched, but it was enough to spur her into action. She emptied the register frantically, dumping its contents into grocery bags. The safe is in the back." The robber with 6 arms glanced at the man holding a gun to Izuku's head and nodded. Fine, he responded. Let's go. Izuku didn't know how long they were in there. He kept waiting for the sound of a gunshot, of something ringing through his ears, but he could only hear his heart beating out of his chest. He looked at Aizawa, who kept his eyes firmly on Izuku. His gaze was steady and reassuring, promising they'd be okay, even though he couldn't say it in so many words. It was the only thing keeping him calm when the barrel of a gun was pressed against his skull. Eventually they returned, though how long had passed Izuku didn't know. The man with 6 arms gathered the bags of money together and pulled something out from his bag. He didn't know what could be scarier than the 2 guns the man had already been waving at the 3 of them. But seeing him reach for something made his anxiety spike. Duct tape. It was just duct tape. Compared to the guns, a roll of duct tape was pretty innocuous. It couldn't be used to kill them, right? The man approached Aizawa menacingly, pulling the tape from its roll with a loud hiss as it ripped away. Right? Seeing the large man stalk towards them, suddenly he didn't feel so sure. They bound his wrists together and covered his mouth before the man stood and did the same to Izuku. Once restrained, he's forcefully shoved down next to Aizawa, and he watches as they do so once more to the cashier. She was trembling, breathing hard and fast through her nose. She's going to start hyperventilating if she doesn't calm down soon. But they can't do much while the robbers are here. He could almost cry in relief once they were gone. Aizawa, ever the underground hero, slipped a small blade from his boot and cut himself free. He did the same for Izuku and the woman. As soon as her hands were free, she ripped the tape from her lips and started gasping for breath, clutching at her throat as she wheezed for more air. Aizawa took her hand and tried to ground her. "Ma'am, you're all right. Everything is okay, you're safe," he muttered reassurances as she gripped his hand tightly. She reached out with the other hand, and Izuku reached back. "They're gone now," Aizawa continued. "You're okay." Eventually, she calmed down, looking a bit apologetic as she let go of their hands. With the civilian's panic attack now over, Aizawa turned his focus to Izuku. "You okay?" And Izuku crumpled. What little composure he had left disappeared with those 2 words. He crashed into Aizawa's chest and held him tight, crying into his hero uniform. He felt so weak. He'd gone against the League, face-stained, faced muscular, but 2 men robbing a grocery store and he was powerless. He just froze up. He couldn't do anything. He was supposed to be a hero, the kind whose legs moved without thinking, but he was just useless. "Izuku," Aizawa said softly, rubbing his back. "You weren't useless or weak. You did exactly what you were supposed to. You're not a hero yet, kid." He's not sure if he believes that. Not when they got away. He should have fought back. He should have been stronger. "Hey," Aizawa chided, not unkindly. "None of that. You were strong. You kept it together in a situation you never should have been put in. You were held hostage, Izuku. We all were. There's nothing anyone could have done without risking the safety of all of us in that room. They got away, but everyone made it out with their lives. That's a win, kid." I was so scared. "I know. You're safe now, Izuku." "You make me feel safe." He felt the arms around him tighten. "Good. I'm glad." Shoda pinched the bridge of his nose and cursed his headache. Midoriya had been in a daze while he dealt with the police. He gave a statement for the both of them, and had an officer drive them back to campus. "Come on, let's get you to bed." Midoriya nodded as Shoda led him into the dorms and through the common room. Oi, nerd! What took you so long? Bakugo yelled, seeing the two of them walk in. Shota glared at him, wishing his quirk could silence him the same way it did his husband. Fuck, his head was pounding. Bakugo paused and looked them up and down. What happened? Bakugo demanded, more than asked. He's fine, Shota responded instead. You can ask him tomorrow. His words were laced with a threat, and luckily for Shota, Bakugo backed down easily for once. They arrived at his dorm without further interruption. You can knock on my door if you need to talk, Shota offered, then added. Or your classmates. You can break curfew just this once. Do what you need to take care of yourself. All right? Izuku nodded. Thanks, Sensei. Shota smiled softly. Of course, kid. Izuku was mortified, to say the least. He'd broken down in front of Aizawa, and he was nothing but a liability back in the store. If it wasn't for him, Sensei would have had his capture weapon and no hostage to worry about. He might have been able to stop those men from robbing the store, or at the very least, keep them from getting away. He hasn't been that scared since the sludge villain first attacked him. He hasn't felt so powerless since... And Izuku groaned, pushing his head into his hands in frustration. He couldn't stop thinking about it. He'd later be thankful that this was all that he was thinking about. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Intrusive Thoughts. The second half of this one-shot will be up next. I did break this one up here because I thought it was a great place where we're kind of at the point where the attack that the two of them experienced is over. Kind of have some foreshadowing and some ideas of what's about to happen next. Would love to hear your theories, your reactions to everything so far in the comments below. This fic is located over on AO3, so if you have an opportunity, hasn't gotten enough support yet on the author's work, so you can leave comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it would be much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.